Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into something really quite fascinating and, well, frankly, a bit perplexing.
Mm,
We're looking at the recent U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities.
right.
And what's so striking here is just the sheer difference, the wild discrepancy, really,
Yeah.
in the claims about how successful they were, what the impact actually was.
Yeah.
We're basing this on a Reuters report that lays out this whole puzzle pretty clearly.
Exactly. And our job for you today really is to try and untangle these very conflicting stories, particularly what the administration was saying officially versus, well, the quieter assessments coming out from the intelligence side.
So the goal is to give you a clearer picture.
Yeah, a clear picture of what the sources say, but also maybe why these stories are so different. It's quite the gap.
Okay, let's get into it then. So right after the strikes happened, the administration came out with some uh, really bold claims.
Very bold.
President Trump, for example, he said the strikes essentially eliminated Iran's key nuclear sites and then completely and fully obliterated.
Obliterated. That's a powerful word.
It really is. Hard to misinterpret that.
Oh, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he pretty much doubled down.
Yeah.
Claimed the strikes had, again, obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions, their ability to even make weapons.
Wow.
He even said massive bombs hit exactly the right spot at each target and worked perfectly. Almost sounds like a movie line.
It does a bit, yeah.
And then Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, she reinforced it too. She said, and this is a direct quote, "Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration."
Total obliteration, 14 massive bombs. Okay.
Meanwhile, you have Iran, of course, sticking to their line that the program's peaceful, denying they're after weapons at all. That's their consistent position.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, because almost right away, a very different story started bubbling up from the intelligence folks.
Mm-hmm.
The Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, their initial U.S. intelligence assessment, it found the strikes only set back Tehran's program by, quote, a matter of months, maybe even just a month or two.
Just months after total obliteration.
Right. And crucially, it found Iran's enriched uranium stocks not eliminated, not at all. How do you square that circle?
Well, that's the core tension, isn't it? This DIA assessment, it was classified, and reportedly, it just directly contradicted the public statements from the Trump administration.
Directly at odds.
Yeah, and this isn't just, some academic debate. It really speaks to that clash between immediate political messaging, wanting to project strength, decisiveness.
Right, project success.
Exactly. Versus the more cautious, data-focused intelligence world where accuracy tends to trump, well, public perception.
And it caused waves internally, too.
Apparently so. The report itself generated significant disagreement, which tells you something. It highlights just how complex this is, how hard it is to really know the damage inside these heavily protected, sort of secret facilities like Fordo, Isfahan, Natanz.
Underground, hard to see.
Very. And you had a U.S. official anonymously admitting the strikes may not have been nearly as successful as the public was told. And that, fundamentally, the full extent of the damage, still unknown.
Still unknown. Okay, so this disagreement, this clash, it must have had political fallout.
Oh, absolutely. Immediately. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries came out pretty quickly saying there was, quote, zero evidence for Trump's obliteration claims.
Zero evidence. That's blunt.
It is. And what happens when the intelligence community seems to be saying one thing and the president another? It raises serious questions, right, about transparency, about accountability.
Sure does.
And then adding to that, classified briefings for Congress members on this reportedly canceled.
Canceled. So even lawmakers couldn't get the detail.
Apparently not right away, which just makes getting a clear, verified picture even harder for everyone, including policymakers. It also just reminds us, initial military reports are just that, initial.
They can change.
They can change as more intel comes in. So this whole thing isn't just about what happened, it's also about how we find out what happened and, frankly, who gets to shape that story.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What does this all mean for you, listening to this, trying to navigate today's, information overload? We've clearly seen this huge gap, right? On one side, claims of total, perfect success, obliteration.
Yep.
And on the other, a much more measured, cautious intelligence assessment suggesting, well, a limited setback at best.
A temporary delay, maybe?
It just really hammers home how challenging it is to know the full truth in these super complex, high-stakes global situations.
It really does. And it brings up a pretty important question for all of us, I think. In
Oh.
these kinds of situations, with competing stories swirling around, what does it actually take to verify an outcome?
How do we know it's real?
Exactly. And how do these different narratives, these different stories end up shaping how we understand really critical world events? It really encourages you, the listener, to think about weighing multiple perspectives.
And asking critical questions.
Definitely. Asking those critical questions whenever you're assessing these kinds of major global incidents.